Good night, Papua New Guinea. I'm Malcolm Wara, and welcome to another episode of Infocus. Tonight, we look at the issue of youth empowerment. Youth empowerment is the process of involving the young population in the decision-making of a community. It presents an avenue through which they can make their voices heard and recognize the power that they have. Youths make up about 60% of the population in Papua New Guinea, which equates to 7.3 million inhabitants, as per the UNFPA 2022 figures. This has presented both its sets of challenges and opportunities. Tonight, we look at how the issue of youth empowerment is addressed at a bureaucratic level and at a community level. Joining us for discussions tonight is Mr. David Rupert Lawrence, who is the Principal Advisor, International Relations at the National Youth Development Authority. Also, we have Mr. Dagia Aka, Marketing and Communications Manager at The Voice Inc. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Okay. Firstly, could you give us your individual perspective on how you perceive youth empowerment?
First of all, we're discussing young people, and youth basically is the transitional process of a human from childhood into adulthood. And so the youth empowerment perspective as a social development specialist, my view on youth empowerment is making sure that resources are made available for young people, to equip them to take charge of the future that they want to build, and also acknowledging the differences or maybe the challenges that they are facing today and how we can address those issues by making sure that young people are participating in development, making positive contributions to society, and at the same time the transition period from childhood to adulthood is smooth and in a way that young people are well informed to make proper or well-informed decisions in order to lead the future.
Thank you so much, David, for providing that perspective in terms of youth empowerment in Papua New Guinea. Starting quite early in the youth development space and journeying through the space over the last 10 years or so, when we talk about the issue of youth empowerment, or when we talk about what is an empowered person, when someone is empowered, they're able to participate in terms of conversations and issues that are of importance to them. And for me, if I'm going by that definition of an empowered person is an engaged person, is someone who's participating, I think when we talk about the issue of youth empowerment in Papua New Guinea, yes, certainly there is a certain section of the youth population that are being empowered to actively engage and participate in issues of importance to young people. But I think a lot of the issues that we see that are arising in terms of what young people are facing and what's happening within society, that people peg to young people as being the instigators of, is an indication of the fact that while some youth are empowered, there's a large number of the population that aren't necessarily properly empowered to participate in issues of importance to them or demand that issues of importance to them are addressed. So youth empowerment in Papua New Guinea, is it happening? Yes. Stakeholders are doing that, making sure that empowerment is taking place, but a large portion of the population still needs to be brought in and empowered to participate actively in issues of importance.
You mentioned stakeholders, and both your respective organizations are very actively involved in the issue of addressing the issue of youth empowerment. Could you explain the role of what your individual organizations do?
I think I can start off giving the answer for that. So I'm from The Voice Inc. A lot of people would usually hear our organization being referred to as TVI, which is the acronym for The Voice Inc. And The Voice Inc. is a civil society organization that is dedicated to supporting citizens to act and build a sustainable future. So bulk of our work is working with members of our community, which are young people or our stakeholders, and seeing how we can work closely with them to act and build a sustainable future. I suppose summarizing that, supporting them to create positive change within their communities. So The Voice Inc. initially started as a student awareness group at the University of Papua New Guinea in 2007, when a group of law students recognized the need to go out and empower people with knowledge about the Constitution so that they could create change within their communities. So what was a student awareness group turned into The Voice Inc. and was later incorporated in 2010. And we've spent the last 15 years working mainly in the space of youth development, now transitioning to something a little bit more, working with young people, offering programs that is able to upskill them, help them find their purpose, and then support them to go and create change within their communities. So I think in a snapshot, that's how I can describe the voicing for you.
David, you come from a government perspective,
agency,
so
yeah.
could you highlight the mandate of your organization and how the organization has come about?
The National Youth Development Authority is a government agency that's responsible for youth development in the country, and it was backed by a piece of legislation called the National Youth Development Authority Act 2014. Prior to that, the youth movements in Papua New Guinea all started post-independence, and from the early 80s or 70s to early 90s, the youth movement or the youth voice was known as the youth engagement movement or youth movement program. In most of that period of time, there wasn't any formal or institutionalized organization for young people that was taking care of young people. And back then we only had activists. So a new number of people that we can make mention of are late Dr. Narakobi. And during those times, and young people were meeting under the trees, trying to find a space where they could actually contribute to society, because at that time there were a lot of issues around young people that were rising. From 1990 to 1999, there was the National Youth Service Program that came in, and what they did was that the government picked youth focal points in different provinces in order to establish the youth voice in the country so that government could listen to young people and address those issues. Fast forward from 1999 to 2014, we had the National Youth Commission. Under the National Youth Commission, we had the young people's voices were centralized, but at the same time we had a dual reporting structure to the minister. So we had the National Youth Commission, and there was a body called the National Youth Council, and the chairperson of the National Youth Council and the National Youth Commissioner had the same reporting powers to the minister, and that kind of caused a collision between the two bodies. And so we had the experts to come in to draft a new bill called the National Youth Development Authority Bill, which was passed in 2014. And so in this new structure, we have a Director General that reports directly to the Minister, and the young people's representative voices are channeled through the National Youth Forum, where two youth representatives are elected to sit on the board of the National Youth Development Authority and report directly to the Minister.
So you mean Minister for Community Affairs?
Yes, the Minister for Community Development, Youth and Religion. Okay. So the National Youth Development Authority's function is to develop policies and report on legislations pertaining to youth development to the minister. At the same time, also creating policy advocacy awareness to its partners and stakeholders, and implementing the coordination of implementing the national youth policy. And those are only a few functions that I've also reported, but also the authority also has the powers to also regulate the programs and coordination and research of youth development in the country. So very much in a nutshell, I would say the National Youth Development Authority is a government agency that is the custodian of youth in the country.
Dagia, you also have, I believe, 5 streams of work that your organization is engaged in. Could you elaborate on them?
Absolutely. So the Voice Sync engages in a lot of different work. And over the last 15 years, our work has ranged from running programs to running seminars to engaging stakeholders in different opportunities for dialogue. But we've been able to categorize this work into 5 main work streams. And so those work streams are education is our number 1 work stream. And that work stream focuses on the work that we do with our partner universities. So the Voice Sync has partnerships with the 5 state universities. So the University of Papua New Guinea, University of Technology, University of Goroka, University of Natural Resources and Environment, and Western Western Pacific University. And through those partnerships, we have what are known as Centers for Leadership, that we are able to have a presence on campus and work closely with the young people that are part of our community on that particular campus, whilst providing opportunities for them to be able to continue their growth whilst on university. Our other work stream is community. So we have what are CleanGen clubs and CleanGen communities all around Papua New Guinea. The CleanGen is a movement that was founded by the Voice Inc. that we support and work with. And so that is the work stream of community. We have coalitions. So it's important for us to work in coalitions with partners and stakeholders. For example, the National Youth Development Authority, because we recognize that we can't do things on our own. Digital platforms, which is us going into the digital space. And of course, the final work stream is social business. And so if you're a fan of Jacks of PNG, you would have seen that we have merchandise there. And so we understand it's important to try to be self-sustaining. So social business is our way to try and raise capital on our own, aside from the donor funding we receive to do our work.
Thank you, gentlemen. We now take a quick break. Join us on the other side for more discussions. Welcome back to Infocus. We continue our discussions with Mr. David Rupert Lawrence and Mr. Dagia Aka. Mr. Lawrence, your organization recently launched the National Youth Empowerment Policy 2020 to 2030. It's titled Bringing Young People to the Center of Sustainable Development and Maximizing Benefits. Could you elaborate on the rationale behind this particular policy stance?
National Youth Development Authority launched the National Youth Policy, not the National Youth Empowerment Program, 2020 to 2030, and that was based on the alignment from the Sustainable Development Goals to the regional framework, what we call the Pacific Youth Development Framework, and then that's also aligned to the medium-term development goals, the Vision 2050 and the National Constitution, and other sectorial policies that cuts across the youth agenda. So the current policy it stems out from the previous policy from 2007 to 2017, and we took 2 years as far as the public policy processes are concerned. We had the 4 regional consultations in 4 regions of Papua New Guinea, and based upon these consultations, youth development workers, partners and stakeholders, and young people themselves came to the consultation to put down a set of outcomes that we wanted to achieve in the youth space for the next 10 years. And what that looks like is that putting young people at the center of sustainable development really means that young people's issues should not only be advocated, but rather inviting young people at the tables of decision making, also being involved in implementation, as well as designing programs, which is alluded to solving the issues of youth development in the country. Very often resources are not centered or maybe allocated to young people's development. In many cases. So this policy is trying to achieve that and also trying to communicate with other agencies because youth is a cross-cutting issue, and we also want to involve young people in pockets of different sectors. For example, you will find youth in fisheries, youth in agriculture. You will also find youth in political participation. You will find youth in education and employment, as well as youth in environmental protection and conservation. So it's more like a one-stop shop roadmap for young people or government agencies and partners to come together to implement these strategies. However, in order to achieve the outcomes of the policy, we cannot act alone as the agency. So, which means that our coordination level at the national level has to be well planned and also to be inclusive. And in this new approach, we are now inviting non-government organizations or the civil society organizations, as well as business houses, to be part of that process of empowering young people and also giving them a part to take make or a part to implement within the National Youth Policy 2020 to 2030.
Dagia, as David has mentioned, involving NGOs, your organization is also a very prominent NGO group engaged in that youth space. Can you highlight for us how you found the National Youth Policy?
Sure thing. Before joining the Voice Inc., I had worked in a number of different youth stakeholder organizations, and I had the opportunity to actually be part of the consultation process that David was referring to earlier. In fact, I facilitated the consultation process for the Momasa region that was held in Leh. But in terms of how the Voice Inc. has been able to engage with this policy and our views around this policy, I think as a document itself, it really is, as David had mentioned, it sets out a roadmap in terms of goals that we want to achieve and how we're engaging with young people and ensuring that they are part and partial of developmental agendas that are of concern to them or affect them directly. And so if you have an opportunity to read the policy, I do encourage, whether you're a youth stakeholder organization or a young person yourself, to get your hands on a copy of the policy and read through and see the different goals that have been set out within that policy itself. I echo what David had shared about how this policy is unique in the sense that it does indicate stakeholders outside of government that the National Youth Development Authority wants to engage with, and so that allows rooms for organizations such as the Voice Inc. to see where we fit into the work that's going to be done and how we do that. But it is important to also highlight that whilst we set out a lot of these very ambitious goals, the real measure of success is within the achievement and the outworking of said goals. And I know that the policy mentions a number of things that we need to have delivered at certain points in time, and I think a lot more work needs to go into making sure that it's not just a document that we speak about, but we're actually working together in tandem to achieve the goals that have been set out within that policy. I commend the National Youth Development Authority because I know within the policy it also sets out in terms of the creation of youth development councils from the LLG up to the provincial levels. And so we've, as an organization, we've been able to engage with one of these youth developmental councils and see how that setup has helped in terms of channeling youth voice to authority. But of course, more work can be done to improve said processes.
David, it is worth noting that a lot of governments and intergovernment organizations, they have varying definitions of who to be categorized as a youth. For Papua New Guinea, the National Executive Council recently revised the policy, as we mentioned, the Youth Empowerment Policy, and it put the age bracket between 12 to 30 years of age, replacing the previous age bracket of 15 to 38 years. Can you explain what was the rationale behind that decision?
Malcolm, there is an interesting conversation during the consultation process of the policy. We also had what we call the policy interpretation workshops. So apart from just developing the policy or the roadmap, we wanted to also bring in partner stakeholders and young people also to deliberate on what this policy really looks like and how it translates down on the ground. The challenge that we have currently right now is that by the Acts under Section 63 of the National Youth Development Authority Act 2014, it states that the youth definition is from 12 to 38. If you look at other contexts, rather from the UN, youth is defined from 15 to 25 or 24. The Commonwealth defines youth from the age of 15 to 29. If you go into other African countries, it can go to 40 or can be 45, and in other Pacific countries, it's 40 and below. Interestingly, these were the questions that we raised on why did the legislators or even those who were drafting the bill came up with the definition from 12 to 38. So their perspective in defining youth ranging from 12 to 38 is that in youth development, the early stages, let's say the early teens from 12 to 19, that is the stage when young people transition from childhood to puberty stage and then adolescent stage. And then we have the mid-youth, which is from 20 to 29, that's where you will find that young people are now thinking that they are no longer teenagers anymore. They are now grown-up adults. They need to make, have some kind of establishment in life. And then 30 and above, you see that young people, well, as per that perspective, there are less opportunities in terms of the social indicators of this cohort of young people between 30 to 38.
We now take a quick break. Join us on the other side for more discussions. Welcome back. You're watching Infocus. Still in the studio with me is Dagia Aka from the Voice Inc. and David Rupa from the Youth Development Authority. What are some challenges you face in your respective organizations? We'll start with Dagia.
I think challenges, and I believe this question is, in reference to the outworking of our programs and even to a certain extent the outworking of government priorities and policies, such as the youth policy. One thing that we've realized as an integral challenge to the work that we do is obviously just the landscape that we have within Papua New Guinea, the length and breadth of Papua New Guinea. As much as we'd like to reach out to as many young people as we can through outworking the programs that we're doing, sometimes in terms of resourcing manpower to be able to go out and reach everyone isn't possible. And so that means that yes, whilst we do have an impressive footprint in terms of our work, it's very limited in terms of where we can go, when we can go, and the amount of people and resources that we can dedicate to that. So I think a key hindrance or a key challenge will always be trying to outwork or deliver programs in a country like Papua New Guinea. It's difficult to go up to the highlands and run programs, especially when you have so many provinces and long drives to make to get to certain places. And even when you go to NGI, you have to get on a dinghy and go out. Now, I'm not saying that we don't do that. As the Voice Inc., as an organization, we've been able to do that, to go to places such as Tube Tube in Milne Bay Province, which is quite a far ride on the boat out. Over the weekend, I was in Delena in Central Province, which was an 8-hour journey for me to get there. It doesn't mean we don't do that, but it is a hindrance. It is a challenge that organizations such as ours, and I'm sure even government organizations such as NIDA face when we're trying to outwork our programs and even achieve goals that are set out within the youth policy.
Are there any international partners that you engage with and work and collaborate on certain projects?
For the Voice Inc., we do have a number of different partners internationally. Some of these might be the donor partners that we work closely with, and of course there's partners that support the work that we do. And so we've had a number of different partners over the years. I can't speak to specific partners at this point in time, but I think a few key ones that I can share is, for example, we partnered with Facebook last year to run an awareness campaign on internet security and online safety. So that was an impressive partnership for us to be able to have last year. But we have had a number over the years, in the 15 years of the Voice Inc.
What are 2 or 3 key points that you like for the viewers out there to understand about youth empowerment? We'll start with David.
Yes, I'd like to make this clear to everyone that youth empowerment is not only the government's responsibility. We as adults make the decision to bring up a child in a home, and children or young people don't grow up in programs or organizations. They grow up in a community and a family unit. So youth development or empowerment is everyone's responsibility. It individually comes from the young people to better themselves and to take up space and also find opportunities where they can better themselves. Also to families as parents, it is our responsibility of how we groom our young people, imparting good values so that they can contribute positively to society, and also to those who are holders of power when it comes to such as organizations or institutions. So there needs to be more integrity and transparency and accountability of how we are conducting ourselves, especially for those of us who are in public institutions, on trying to empower our young people, and at the same time we shouldn't be working in silos. So we appreciate the work which the Voice Inc. and many others who are doing out there, because where the government's arms cannot reach people in the rural areas. It's the non-government organizations and faith-based organizations and churches that carry out the work. So collaboration, partnerships, and also responsibility is what I'd like to highlight, because youth is a cross-cutting issue.
I think in terms of youth empowerment, I go back to the very beginning in what I said, that an empowered person is a person that's able to participate, a person that's able to engage in issues that are of importance to them. And I concur with David that youth empowerment is everybody's business. It isn't something that should just be outworked by agencies such as the National Youth Development Authority and civil society organizations that are youth stakeholder organizations. It isn't just our work, it's everyone's work. And if we're serious about making sure that young people are empowered and engaged and participating, we need to be doing our bit, whether it's in our small spaces of influence or our organizations, to see what we're doing to empower young people. I think at the end of the day, an important thing is, how are you providing platform for them to speak? Is that platform space, is that platform safe? And is it a platform that they have access to fully utilize? And at The Voice Inc., as an organization, we've been privileged to be a platform that young people continue to use to raise issues that are of concern to them. And I do hope that we can see more organizations, more people that are concerned about the issues of youth in Papua New Guinea, provide space for them to be involved in conversations that are important.
Thank you, gentlemen. Unfortunately, time has caught up with us. This has been a very comprehensive discussion on our topic for tonight, youth empowerment. Before we go, I'd like to take this time to thank our special guests, Mr. David Rupa, Principal Advisor at the National Youth Development Authority, and Mr. Dagia Aka, Communications and Marketing Manager for The Voice Inc. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Malcolm, and thanks for having us.
From the entire Infocus team, thank you for joining us tonight, and do join us next week for another episode of Infocus. Good night from us.